Pascal Siakam is back in the cozy confines of all NBA status. And the bridge between this selection and his last is made up of his bubble performance, the Tampa year, a surgery, and trade rumors. It was not done in the easiest way possible, and he did it by taking the impossible situations and turning them into areas of opportunity. Let's talk about the year that was and how he can build on it going forward. But first, make sure to like and subscribe. I'm told it helps. So it's important to note that as the Raptors were building out this scheme of everybody's 6'9", Pascal Siakam was the example they were working from. All the desired traits and things they were looking for had been acted out in front of them for years already. In this system, the Raptors asked for an unconscionable amount of contributions from Pascal Siakam, and the result was that he led the NBA in total isolations, total closeouts, and minutes per game. I don't know how to cross-reference that against other seasons in NBA history, but it sounds like he had one of the highest workloads of all time and found room for an all-NBA selection within that. That's absurd. So let's talk about those isolations, the most used type of offensive possession for him. Sometimes he had a small on him, sometimes he had a big who couldn't keep up, and sometimes he had a like-sized guy who couldn't handle the finesse. And by the end of the season, there really wasn't a player that could guard him alone. So the end result of so many of his isolations, the process or fact of being isolated, often saw him doubled. He was on an island relative to his teammates, but not to the other team, who would throw doubles his way, move off of other players to gap him, and play pack line defense altogether. This created a rift between two outcomes for these possessions. If Siakam's teammates were hitting, hey, that's great. That's some assists and some easily created looks. If they aren't, though, and they were bottom three in makes and percentage from behind the line after the All-Star break, then that meant that Siakam had to access wormholes on the court just to try and deliver himself to his spots to score. The difficulty of what he did shouldn't be understated, and the shot-making repertoire he showed in the mid-range was tremendous. He took 52% of his shots from the mid-range this year, hit on 46% of them, and 80% of those were unassisted. This is a counter he's been working on for some time, and we've seen linear progression in this area as a result. Push shots with either hand, pull-ups, baby faders, step backs. His mid-range bag is really deep. His playmaking was really good, and when you account for how much difficulty like-sized players have creating en masse for their teammates, it was great. A 2-to-1 assist ratio this year, better reads out of doubles, of which he saw many, and he stopped going to the bailout jump pass as often as he was earlier in the season and earlier in his career. Passing from a position of advantage and control is something that he improved on this year. And that makes sense because you have to get to positions of advantage and control to work on this, and those reps as the number one guy help. But on top of that, we could have seen these numbers inflate. Many times this year, we saw Nick Nurse come into the post-game press conference and say something to the effect of, yeah, Pascal could add 12, 14 assists tonight if we could have hit some shots. That's accurate. He was churning out looks for everyone, and he did so for shooters. He did so for the guys who make their money on the inside. He was making plays for everybody. And when he came along with the bench mob and was making some reads and handling the ball a little bit, it was cool. But what we've seen since then is a progression that just has been skyrocketing until now, where he is full stop one of the best playmaking bigs in the NBA. His size, his role, and his skill set has put him in a very unique spot league-wide. Even though his mobility is a huge facet of his game, it's easy to see how well his playmaking will progress as he continues to play out his career. And the off-ball stuff is great in small samples and limiting in large samples. We've already seen him become an incredibly effective off-ball player, and he won a championship as the second leading scorer while playing off of Kyle and Kawhi. He's got a great nose for cuts and opportunity. However, the Raptors don't really have players who create those advantages for him, so we don't get much of it. And the other aspect is spot-up shooting, which was underwhelming. He hit 48% of his corner threes, which is tremendous, but basically no one on the Raptors can dependably create those looks for him, and the Raptors typically have to keep Siakam above the break to run actions after any of the other players have tried something, failed, and caused a reset. And above the break shooting was the worst aspect of Siakam's game this season. He shot 32%, provided very little in the way of pull-up potency. And late in games, when teams would load up on the Raptors' pet plays, Siakam would usually be headed downhill. But next season, the goal has to be punishing teams more often when the ball finds him above the break. More shots made, more aggressive closeouts to attack. It would make things way easier. He also tapped into the classical big man stuff by putting forth his best year as a screener and a roller, and by far his best year as a rebounder. The Raptors went small this season, and that meant that Siakam had to grind for more rebounds and more contested ones at that. The Raptors were much better at closing out defensive possessions with Siakam on the floor this year, and it's largely because he committed himself to throwing his body at the glass. And that kind of segues us into his defense. Defensively, his role was as exhaustive and all-encompassing as ever. And that's because Siakam is a rare mix of length, explosion, and stamina. He was the perfect problem solver for a defense that gambles itself into huge wins, yes, but also huge problems. The Raptors pull off the corners, peel switch, X out, and fly around the court in general. No one does so with more purpose in that scheme than Siakam. He was an effective help side rim defender, terrific stepping out on switches, and always capable of disrupting actions as a roamer. It's no surprise that the most memorable defensive plays in clutch time often involve number 43. Early in the season, you could see some lapses in stamina or mistakes where he cheated too far off of the weak side. But by season's end, Siakam had a real claim to best defender on the floor, game in and game out. It's really easy to excuse away players seeing a dip on defense when their offensive usage climbs to high places. We do it with a lot of stars. But Siakam answered the call for everything, and that included the defensive side of the floor. He has started to toe the line on what is worth a gamble or hard rotation and what isn't in the pursuit of saving some strength. That's true. You might see him pump the brakes on a contest at the rim that Jared Allen would throw his entire body weight at. But these are decisions a lot of players make. At the very least, Siakam is throwing his body at those contests in clutch time. He's just a hell of a defender. And the big ticket items for next year seem clear as day. The catch and shoot stuff just has to improve. That's such an easy way for him to get better and to add value to the team. And the team needs to invest more pick and roll possessions into his hands. He was above average scoring in that play type over the course of the season, but his frequency doubled in the playoffs where a quarter of his possessions came that way, and he bumped up to above the 80th percentile, clearing more than a point per possession. Give the man some more screen help. And it's counterintuitive a little bit because Siakam is obviously very comfortable in his movement skills with a live dribble, but some more hop steps into the lane on these drives would help. It adds a layer of control and manipulation that might otherwise just be resets. Find your space, control with your pivot and footwork, and find comfort in rising up for push shots and fallaways from those spots. This should help elevate his playmaking quite a bit because the upside defenders won't just get to time up his drives and count his steps. He'll be in more control, and that will dictate that they have to make a more concerted and definitive effort to contain him in space, opening up his teammates. Some of these are little things, but when you're as good as Siakam, it's mostly the little things. And one big thing, the pull-up three. It was 34% in 2019-20, his first All-NBA season. He hasn't really been able to replicate that anywhere else in his career, and you wonder what it would look like if it did come around, and if that's something that's a huge part of his development in the offseason. I can take it or leave it. It would obviously be a huge boon for his game. It has rocketed up a bunch of other players' careers and made them way more potent, way more valuable, but it's a really tough thing to add into your bag, especially as a versatile and diverse option. So I guess we'll see on that. So that's Pascal Siakam's All-NBA year and some projection for 2023. So thanks for tuning in with me. I hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, I'll see you.